Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to talk about learning impossible pieces through microscopic strategy. And I know last time I uploaded a video that talked about a specific piece of music. I thought I could have named the video this way as well, but maybe it's more compelling to just talk about something that's impossible or very difficult, right? So some kind of real reach piece for you. And I think there's many different aspects of the methods and strategies that I teach, but this was a real example that came up over the last week with a real student that will go unnamed. But, I think maybe sometimes the most useful tips and, I guess they're not just tips, they're whole strategies and methods and so on. The most useful aspects of those to share are those that often are like actually happening in real life during the week. So this was a student that we kind of started together recently, kind of a intermediate-ish level student, maybe beginner, intermediate, depending on how you look at things. And we chose a piece. It's a Bach Prelude. It's an E minor from Well-Tempered Clavier, Book 1. And, there's quite a bit of like ornamentation and such going on in the right hand and seems to be quite challenging for him. And he was kind of wondering like, oh, maybe we should pivot to something else, because even with the methods, it seemed like it would be very difficult to put the hands together, and it seems like the coordination maybe is beyond him. And just by making a strategic shift at this very tiny, like I said, microscopic, minuscule, granular level, I think it's totally going to be possible for the student to play this piece. He doesn't need to do like tons of other exercises and things first. He doesn't need to study other things for 1 or 2 years or other easier pieces first. I think we can just get right into it. So I'll show you the music here in this example. So we have this music here, some of this fingering. He wrote some of it, I wrote. And the other videos, as I've mentioned before, like they explain different aspects of my logical methodology, so I won't explain that in detail here, of course, but suffice to say that as a very brief review, as always, a one measure set would be one measure plus the following beat. So basically we're playing like from star to star. So indeed also like, that one, that'd be one measure plus the following beat. So basically from first beat of 2 to first beat of 3, or first beat of 1 to first beat of 2. And I think in this example, it might be good to actually mark a number of different markings. So these are half measure set markers, as some of you might remember. So this means it's literally half of a measure, right? Plus the following vertical. If you find that you're not able to identify half of a measure, then obviously you can ask your teacher, or you can even just deduce it logically. For instance, like there are obviously 16 things in this measure and they all seem similar to each other. So after 8 of those things, right, that would be half of the measure, and then you have the following beat. Now, of course, in actuality, these are called 16th notes, but all I'm saying is that even if you're teaching a student that doesn't know what 16th notes are, or you are a student that doesn't know all the formal terminology, it's still possible to like logic or reason out certain things just kind of through common sense and just reasoning it out yourself. So, okay, I guess we can use green. So these would be quarter measure set markers, and maybe I'll mark them through here. So each one of these is a quarter of a measure plus the following vertical. So effectively we're going beat to beat here. And again, these are just kind of like visual reminders so that we can see where everything is. And let's see. Okay. So, and then these would be eighth measure set markers, these little swirls. So this is just allowing the student to easily see, where are all these different fractions of the measure. An advanced pianist, intermediate, advanced, like piano teachers, you're not going to actually need to literally mark these markings in order to know where, the eighth measure set markers are, where the quarter measure set markers are, and so on. So, so my intention in some of these videos is to assume that hopefully you've seen some of the other earlier YouTube videos, and I'm just going to be going like pretty quickly. If we were actually in some kind of like lesson situation or something, I of course would explain this probably much more slowly and tailor it to each person. But here we'll just do it at a very high level. So, okay, so maybe we'll start with this first. So basically, this student started to work on this piece using my methodology, and he solved the first half measure set. And we use these funny brackets to denote solving both hand sets. And solving just means you've played correctly once a given section that you've written here. So for instance, I wrote the fraction half. That means that half a measure plus the following vertical was played, right? So that's what's indicated by that marking over there. And the way that we solve this, right, the way that we enable ourselves to then play this correctly one time, you can break it down in many different ways, but usually the default, as you know, will be adding in reverse. Maybe some of you know from previous videos when that would mean playing from there to there, and then from there to there. Or sometimes it might be like right hand, left hand, both, right hand, left hand, both, depending on the situation. So there is a way to go about solving each of these sets, such like it's not merely just playing over and over again. It's a certain way that we go about constructing the coordination together such that you can then play this half measure set from there to there. So that student did that. And then I believe that he then solved this quarter measure set, which means, from this green circle to green circle. And then he went from there to there, or I think he attempted to. And in this case, this is a trill that's written out. The actual notes would be, let's see if I can write it small enough. F sharp, E, F sharp, E. And we won't talk about specifically why in this video, but suffice to say that's how I would play this trill. And I think it's good to also mark where these would align. Like this F sharp is there and it's played with finger 3. This E is here, it's played with 1. This F sharp is here. Maybe I won't do that. I'll just draw a regular line. And it's played with 3. This E is here and it's played with 1. So I think it's good to write out ornaments and see how specifically they're lined up. So in any case, I believe that he tried to solve this quarter, maybe wasn't even successful. And it took him a long time to solve this quarter. Like to play from there to there, even this quarter measure set, like this was, this thing over here, roughly, like that was difficult, very, quite time consuming to put together. And then afterwards here, I believe that he would have tried to solve this half measure set, this half measure. So this half measure set would be from there to there. This half measure set would be there to the beginning of the following line. And you can see that that's not too challenging. I mean, just breaking it up, relative to this, of course, right, then left, then both, or adding smaller sections in reverse, it should be okay. But the thing that so discouraged the student was the fact that this quarter measure set took so long. Like even breaking it down to a quarter measure set, it just took, I don't know how long it took, I assume like 25, 30 minutes longer. And then, of course, we have similarly difficult sections over here and over here. So he kind of asked like, oh, should I switch to another piece? And I said, no, you just have to adjust your strategy. So, so this is a piece that effectively became impossible, or at least improbable, at least very difficult to put together, because the student estimated like, well, if it took me that long to do this, and that was kind of discouraging enough. Both literally and emotionally, like maybe it's going to be too much for me to like piece together all these, complicated little coordinations. So in order to resolve this, you just have to go even smaller. And that's what I mean by microscopic strategy. Like to think like from here to here is a good idea. I guess it wasn't, because it just took too long. It was too... It's good for things to be effortful sometimes because of desirable difficulty in the learning research. Like it takes a lot of effort to achieve and then you remember it better. But if it's too time consuming, it's just not going to be efficient. And we want both efficiency and desirable difficulty. So I put an upper bounds of roughly maybe 5 to 7 minutes or so for solving sets, like for any one little thing that you do. So if this took like 25, 30 minutes or something, that's obviously too time consuming. and it wasn't the right logical decision. So instead of doing the quarters, we actually are going to go even smaller. And before I do that, I would say like the way to solve this quarter, like how does a student even get to the point where you can play from there to there? One way would just be to play right hand and then left hand and then both, and then repeat that process if it doesn't go well. A lot of the time that might not even be successful. It might be that he's adding eighth measure sets in reverse in order to get the quarter. So he might do just right hand from there to there, just left hand from there to there, and then both. And then, right hand from there to there, then left hand, and then both. And then that 6-step process can be repeated over and over again as necessary if it's still not successful, like the quarter measure set. So that seems like a pretty good strategy. That may not have been sufficient. Another thing that the student could have done is add even smaller. Like he could have added like this, like 16th measure sets, basically, right? But even this, I think it could ultimately end up being too time consuming. So like all of those different options I just talked about to solve this quarter measure set within this little universe here, maybe all of them are too time consuming. So instead of trying to solve the quarter measure set, the first pass through we'll try to solve eighth measure sets, only from spiral to spiral. That's it. Don't think that this is too small. Don't think it's a cop-out, because, I mean, even to practice less than one measure sets for many students is like a big deal, but we're not afraid of going down as small as is necessary. So, because this is much more approachable, right? So literally playing from here to here, it's not too bad. And that, of course, in this specific instance, you could end up playing, let's see, I'll make this smaller again, like right hand, there to there, left hand, there to there, and then both. And that might be enough. And then, of course, we can mark eighth, because this is an eighth of a measure plus the following beat. So that would be like spiral to spiral here. Okay, so then I'll erase these just for clarity's sake. And now the next spiral to spiral we have to solve, so to speak, as well. So this one wasn't too bad. We're just going to leave it. We're not going to try to piece it together. So here to here, how do we go about doing this? This is quite a bit more complicated. So I would suggest adding 16th measure sets in reverse, separate in them both. So I'll pick this pretty color. Right hand alone, left hand alone, both. And then could be right hand alone, left hand alone, both. This 6-step process, roughly, adding 16th measure sets in reverse, right, and then left, and then both. And then, I guess we're just carrying that out. Right and then left and then both, the last 16th measure set, and then right and then left and then both, the entire 8th measure set. And that will result in this 8th being solved as well, too. And once I gave that instruction to this student, suddenly the impossible started to seem possible again. Because this is small enough that, he's able to readily carry out the instructions I just described. And you could go even smaller. You could even solve just the 16th measure set and write a 1/16 here, and then over here, and then write a 1/16. And then, as we know from spaced repetition, we actually want to move on. Do not piece these together right now. You want to allow at least like 10, 15, 20 minutes to pass, and then come back later. So on the first pass through, you're marking like half, eighth, probably eighth, probably half, and then keep going, eighth. After some time, then you'll go back and start linking the eighths into quarters. After some time, then you'll go back and start linking the quarters into halves, right? So, and then over here, with the trill written out, so this is, it's a little bit confusing looking perhaps, but you would still solve this the same exact way that you did this. It's just that the notes aren't literally written out. But, I have written here F sharp E, F sharp E. You could actually like write this out in Apple Pencil if you wanted to. But again, for this section, if we erase this stuff here, you would still just do the same exact thing. Like to play from this spiral to this spiral, you know that the right hand has to play F sharp E here. Right? So it would just play F sharp E to over there. And then the left hand would play these two notes. And then you would then you would play both hands together. And then we'll play the entire eighth measure set. So the right hand will play F sharp E, F sharp E, and right on this vertical, the right hand isn't playing anything. It's just F sharp E, F sharp E. Okay, and then the left hand will play just these three notes, and then they'll play them together. And again, that would have resulted in this eighth measure set solved, adding 16th measure sets in reverse, separating them both. So you have to find a task that's small enough, even if it's like the tiniest little thing. Get the student to solve it on their own, and then have them continue to carry that out. So the quarters were too time consuming, but the eighths were far more efficient. And so now that student can see that, the piece isn't nearly as impossible as first seen. I mean, traditionalist thinking would say that the level of coordination that the student has, the amount of, maybe they think a certain amount of dexterity is required to carry this out, or maybe like you need to play more arpeggios and scales and theory and so on, so that your brain can even conceive of what's happening. But the problem is just that people just haven't simplified enough. They just haven't gone down to small enough, and they're not using enough strategic principles in tandem such that they've realized like, oh, actually I can add 16th measure sets in reverse, separate, and then both to solve these eighth measure sets. That's a thing that the student can do, and he can carry it out pretty efficiently. So as soon as you have the student able to carry out something efficiently, well, they can just go on home and then just keep doing that. And then we can piece them into quarters later, and then we can piece them into halves later. And those are kind of different solves in and of themselves. The reason it seemed impossible at first was because when we did the quarters, it just was too time consuming, too energy draining. It seemed like the amount of effort put in, there was just this very, very small return after a long while. But, the eighths were able to literally do them quickly, and it's generating positive momentum emotionally, mentally as well too. So I hope that this real life example was useful. If you found it interesting, helpful, please like, subscribe, let me know if you have questions. I think in the future, definitely there may be more examples that come up that are like this. And sometimes I might go by the piece name. Other times maybe I'll go by if the solve is very small or very large. And I think the more examples that you see, the more that you'll see how many applications, how flexible the applications of the methodology may be, that they can be used in all different sorts of situations. So all right, looking forward to next time.